Since we got the old transmission out, the new transmission sitting next to it, I want to give you an idea of their size differences. You can see the HM290 is considerably smaller. I'll put the exact dimensions and the length and the distance from the end of the bell housing to the center of the shifter on both transmissions. I'll list that at the end of the video, but you can see that the HM290 is short and the shifter is right here, whereas the Nissan transmission is considerably longer, about 6 inches, and the shifter is located farther towards the rear of the transmission. Okay, going in under the truck, I had to make some modifications to accommodate the shifter location. You see the front here is where the stock shifter would be. Got the nice curved lines up here and straight cuts, and the screw holes for the hold the ring and everything down. Well, the shifter's further back. It's going to land about here. So I cut out this section and I reversed it, and I'll seam seal it and everything, so it'll be fine. It is closer to the seat, although it is several inches in front of the jump seat. If you had a bench seat, it'd be about the same way. I think it'll work just fine, but the shifter stick, rather than being straight, will probably need to have a curve forward just a bit, so that when you're hitting the 2, 4, and 6 gears, you're not up against the seat. And I was able to do all that in the truck with a pair of shears. Wasn't too bad. The new flywheel's installed along with the new pilot bearing, bolts, put a little thread locker on the bolts and torque them to spec, and that's the new bearing. The Chevy bearing that I had in there for the HM290 would not work. The size of the input for both transmissions are slightly different, and just enough so that there's no way you can use the same bearings. Okay, I apologize if we're jumping around a little bit with the editing. A lot of that's because some of this is occurring over a period of several days, because I wish I could say this is something that you just kind of get the parts and in an afternoon you got it done. But let's get under the truck so I can show you what's going on. I put the transmission in. Now I have not gotten the clutch in yet, but I did want it to see if it would fit and if there were any other surprises I might have, and where the transmission crossmember would be, the slip yoke, where it needed to be, which I can't measure for the drive shaft yet because I really need to have the truck on the ground so the suspension is at the correct height. But just to give you an idea, let's see, the transmission crossmember is in the stock location. However, you can kind of see the clearance there. So what I'm going to have to do to make the transmission crossmember work, you see a pink line to the left, and there's one over there. You can barely see it right in there. I'm going to have to section this and modify that crossmember so that the transmission will work. The mount, you can see there's just not enough room to put that mount in there. So I'm going to modify the transmission crossmember so that I can use the stock mount. Something else I noticed, it's kind of hard to tell from this angle, but it's a little better. You can't really get in there too well. It's pretty tight clearance up there. One of the ribs on the top of the transmission, I think I'm going to grind it down when I take the transmission back out and when I put in the clutch, because you can see just by looking up here, the bell housing for the CD transmission is larger than the bell housing is for the 4L60, right where the two meet. So that increased height doesn't really help, and there's a rib on top of that, so that if you're raising the back of the transmission, if you raise it high enough, it can hit the floor. So I'm going to grind that off. I think when the transmission is in its final resting point on the crossmember here, that will be no problem. And I'm going to take this crossmember out. It's my project for the day, and modify it. So let's get to it. This is the transmission crossmember. I've cleaned it up a bit. One modification I made to it when I did my first swap was on the crossmember here. You can see on the bottom the bracing. This is the bracing for the original hole. It was only half that size. So I elongated the hole, made it twice as big, and then I welded in some supports for it. So On the top side, the slot is about twice as big as the factory slot. And I did that so that when using the factory mount, depending on where the bolt holes were to support the cross member to the frame, it gave me a little versatility here as to where this could go. The lines there, I'm going to cut that out, and I'm going to turn it, well, not turn it upside down because that would position this over more here. I'm going to take this, cut this out, and I'm going to shove it in from the bottom if I can so that the height is right here. That would drop this about an inch to inch and a quarter, and I believe that'll give us all the room we need for the transmission to mount. And if we find that it needs to be a little lower, I can take it down even lower than that. I don't want to do anything to affect the structural integrity of this, but this is really very sturdy, so I'm not too worried about that. So let's get cutting on this, and I'm going to remove this top section. In working on the transmission mount, I cut out the top piece of the cross member like I wanted to, but wasn't sure exactly the height to put it at, so I thought I should put the mount onto the transmission first. This is the mount, my original transmission. I wanted to use it because it's only got 1,000 miles on it or so. It's in good shape. So in order to make it work, the bolt holes were closer together than on the Nissan transmission. So what I did was I made this plate that has the correct spacing for the bolts for the mount, and then I'm going to put that over it and weld it, and washers and will also go through there easy enough. And then once mounted to the transmission, then I can get real precise on where to put that plate on the bottom of that cross member. Here it is all together, welded. I opened the area up larger than I had planned on it. This one to make sure that once it was welded, the weld wouldn't be in the way of this washer and bolt head, and it clears everything just fine. So now that the mount is made, I'm going to put it on the transmission, and we can get the more precise measurement in order to mount the bottom plate on that cross member for this to mount into. And this is the result of all the hard work. I channeled out that section in the middle of the transmission, dropped it down there, trimmed it a little bit, re-welded it. It'll be sturdy, and it lets the transmission sit just right. Now, as soon as the paint dries, that no one's ever going to see again, I will put it in the truck and lower the transmission onto it for a final test fit. Okay, for the last trial fit, I put the cross member in place. Now, it is using factory bolt holes, but these were the original ones, this one and this one. I had to move it forward. This next hole is a little smaller. I'm not sure what it's used for, but these two holes were pre-existing. They worked for the trans cross member, so no holes had to be drilled. I moved the cross member forward a little bit, and so you can see in there, everything fits well, and it drops down low enough that it's not going to be necessary to grind that top rib that I was talking about on the transmission. It's going to be fine. I can put my finger through there, so that's enough room. So you can see it works just fine, plenty of clearance. Okay, we'll pull the transmission out because obviously at the time when I put the transmission in for the trial fit, the clutch was not in place. I didn't have the pressure plate at that time. The pressure plate for this is from an LS1 02 Camaro, and that was necessary because my previous setup was from a truck, and this flywheel and pressure plate is meant more for a car. So the car pressure plate will not fit the truck flywheel because they're slightly different in size, not much, but just enough. So this is the complete setup I got. Removed the transmission, obviously, so I could put this in place. I had it actually stabbed in place and wasn't confident I had it right. So I took it all apart completely again, checked my pilot bearing, it was good. This time, to make it a little bit easier to stab the transmission in, I got a couple of bolts and I cut the head off. I'm using as little guide studs there. Yeah, so I can line the transmission when I get it close and make sure I've got it turned in the right direction as I put it in. So the clutch is in place. Now it's just a matter of putting in the transmission, I hope, for the last and final time. Just a note before I put this in place. When I got my kit, there were two hydraulic lines, these steel braided lines. And originally, and they were two different sizes, as you can see in the length. The shorter one was attached to the bottom and the longer one to the top with the bleed. And for the particular application you may have, that may be the best thing to do. But for an OBS, it is not. Because the shorter line on the bottom would not reach the master cylinder for the clutch. And there's no need to have a really long bleed line when you really hopefully only hit to bleed it once. So I reversed the lines so that the shorter line for the bleed is on the top and the longer line is on the bottom, and I believe it will be plenty long enough to attach to the master cylinder without having to use an adapter. I really didn't want to use an adapter because that just potentially has one more leak point within the system. So if I had it to do all over again, I would say get both lines long, and you can always reroute the long line and put your bleed wherever you want it, but it's better that it's too long than too short. I hope the transmission is now in for the last time. The cross member is mounted in tightly. It works out very nicely. See through there. You can still, there's plenty of room. The base of this mount, if I have to get a wrench in there, is also this slot here that my fingers can go through. So that's easy enough to get out. I went ahead and inserted the slip joint or the slip yoke, and it's got a reluctor ring on it. And this is for the fact that we don't have a VSS signal coming off this transmission. So this reluctor ring on the slip yoke will go to this sensor right here. There it is. And this will go to my VSS. There are two other plugs on the transmission. One is for the neutral safety switch, and the other is for the backup light. We're not going to worry about the neutral safety switch at this time. We're just going to go with the backup light. So I've still got a few details to work out. I need to remove the metal line that connected the clutch master cylinder to the slave. I'm going to drop that out of the way and hook up our braided lines. Here's the two electrical connections. I'll have to extend the harness on that. Once we're able to drop this onto the ground, then I can measure for the drive shaft, take it and have it made, get the U-joints, balance, the whole 9 yards. At that point, we just put a shifter in it and some fluid, and hopefully that is all we need to do. If you've made it this far, thanks for sticking with me. We've got a little bit further to go, but we're almost there. As I mentioned before, at the end of the video, I'm going to put some still pics and showing some things, and also some dimensions on the transmissions. I'm also going to show you the gear ratios of the stock HM290 transmission versus the Nissan transmission. Just a little added information. Thanks for watching.